Bonjour. In this video, we shall discuss the regular and irregular verbs in French. Regular verbs are verbs which can be conjugated according to a definite pattern. In the case of regular verbs, the conjugation pattern is predictable and every verb is conjugated in the same way. According to classical grammar, an irregular verb is one whose set of declensions throughout the conjugation is not fully predictable. At some point, the verb displays some form that differs from the expected one. This often happens in the singular indicative present, also in the infinitive and past participle, less often in the future and past simple, even less in the subjunctive, very seldom in the present participle and plural indicative present, and never in the past imperfect. In this sentence, in the first, indicative present. Indicative is a mood and present is the tense. Infinitive is the base form of a verb. The past participle is a form of the verb which is used to form the perfect tense, and it is also used sometimes as an adjective. Future and past simple are tenses. Subjunctive is a mood. Present participle is a form of the verb which is used in continuous tenses. Indicative is the mood, present is a tense, and the past imperfect is another form of past tense. French verbs are divided into three groups: ER verbs, IR verbs, and the third group of verbs. Almost all verbs in the first ER group are regular, and their conjugation is predictable. Several verbs in the IR group are also regular, but the verbs which are included in the third group of verbs are almost all irregular. Now we can take a look at the different groups of verbs. First group. The infinitive ends in ER and the past participle is E accent grave. They share the same root and pronunciation, er. The singular indicative present ends in E, ES, and E. Future has ER plus different endings, the verb avoir in the present. Past simple singular also has endings of the verb avoir in the present. An example is the verb parler, meaning to speak. So the infinitive is parler, past participle is parler, present tense je parle means I speak or I am speaking, tu parles, and il parle. Future, il parlera. Past, il parla. Parler is a regular verb. The second group, the infinitive ends in IR. Present participle is sont. Past participle E, but there are exceptions. Every tense conjugates on either I or ISS, and both present and past singular end in IS, IS and IT. An example: choisir. Choisir is the infinitive. It means to choose. Present participle: choisissons. Past participle: choisi. The present tense conjugation: je choisis, tu choisis, il choisit. Future: il choisira. Past: il choisit. Many of the most important verbs in French are irregular. So, the conjugation of these verbs needs to be memorized, as these conjugations are not always predictable and do not follow a set pattern. There are 8 groups of irregular French verbs in the present tense. First, these 4 verbs, être, avoir, aller and faire, are the most important ones. They are perhaps the most important irregular verbs in all of the French language. Furthermore, the irregular verbs être, avoir and aller are used in compound tenses, that is, tenses where there are 2 verbs. The first 2, être and avoir, are used as auxiliaries or support verbs for the passé composé, and the third, aller, is used as an auxiliary or support verb for the futur proche, the near future. The conjugation of these verbs are highly irregular and they have to be memorized and learnt by heart. Next are the modal verbs. These are perhaps the second most important group of irregular verbs in French. They are a type of helping verb that modifies the mood of the unconjugated verb that comes afterward. In French, when there are 2 verbs, only one verb is conjugated. Some modal verbs are the verb vouloir, to want, pouvoir, to be able to, devoir, to have to, and savoir, to know. These verbs indicate ability, possibility, desire, or necessity. Next we have the irregular-ER stem changing verbs. Most ER verbs are regular and follow a set pattern for their conjugation. However, in the case of some verbs, a stem change takes place. A stem change happens when the root of the verb is the base of the verb without the ending. When this root sees a spelling change, then it is called a stem changing verb. Here are some ER stem changing verbs: acheter, amener, emmener, enlever, geler, harceler, lever, mener, peler, peser, promener. Here, other than acheter, geler, harceler and peler, most verbs that end in ELER or ETER are part of a different stem change group. There are 2 different stem change groups, ELER and ETER verbs. The next group of irregular verbs are the Irregular-IR verbs. The following IR verbs, along with a few others, are considered irregular: tenir, venir. Irregular OIR verbs. When conjugated voir, to see, and recevoir, to receive, have the same endings, even though their stems change throughout the conjugation. Next, the irregular RE stem changing verbs. Prendre, to take, and apprendre, to learn. These two verbs are almost regular except for a few stem changes. This is different from normal regular RE verbs because they drop an extra letter in the nous and vous forms. The four main irregular RE verbs: rire, dire, écrire, lire. Some other RE irregular verbs: croire, boire. These are two more irregular verbs which can be paired together because their conjugations, though not identical, but they are similar. Irregular verbs are found everywhere in French, and as some of the most important and commonly used verbs in French are irregular, their conjugations have to be learned. And in most cases, the only way to learn the conjugations is simply by rote memorization, especially in the present tense. Sometimes some patterns can also be detected. However, memorization is still the only and the best way to learn to conjugate French irregular verbs. That is all in this video. Merci, au revoir.